All right, good afternoon. Friday, or I'm sorry, I'm trying to go back in time. Saturday, February the 8th. I'm Carl. We got Dan in the house, and we
Yes,
got a
sir.
special guest I'll let you introduce in a second here.
Uh-huh.
Excited to have someone different in the studio with us today.
Right.
Not that we don't love our resident Marlon being in the house.
Yeah.
But Dan, before we get started, tell our
Mm-hmm.
listeners how they can get in touch with us.
Absolutely. You can get in touch with us at 800-951-4866. That's the phone number is 800-951-4866. Or you can get in touch with us through any social media platform at Athena Protection Service. Or you can reach us on our website at athenaprotections.com.
And as always, make sure you're hitting that like button and sharing it. Get the message out.
Right.
Also, we've got a sponsor.
That's
Let's
right.
talk about our sponsor a little bit.
Our sponsor is Athena Protection Foundation, and that is our foundation that is dedicated to assisting crime victims with support through any means that they may need. We reach out to crime victims all the time, seeing what they need and how we can support them. And you can reach the Athena Protection Foundation through any social media platform at Athena Protection Foundation or athenaprotectionfnd.org.
All right, awesome. So, as I said a moment ago, we got a guest in the house. Give
We
you a
do.
chance to introduce yourself.
My name is Michael Tompkins.
All right, Michael Tompkins. Made me think back, age myself here a little bit. Made me immediately think of Denver Nugget, Michael Thompson. Y'all might be too young to know anything about that.
A little bit.
But he was the original
Right.
jump out of the sky. I remember one of our uncles having a picture of him on his wall in his room out of Sports Illustrated.
Oh, okay.
Dude's hand was almost to the top of the backboard. Why he felt he needed to jump that high, I don't know. But anyway, welcome to the podcast
All right,
today, Mike. You go by Mike or Mike?
Mike.
All right, we got
Oh, shit. Sorry.
Big Mike in
Okay,
here.
Audie, hold on. All right.
So sorry, just a little bit of interruption, technical difficulties. It's all good. It's all good.
Right.
So Dan, I'm gonna let you go ahead and get started. You usually got a little bit on your mind, and
I do.
talk about what we got, who our guest is, and what's gonna be going on today.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about prison and how prisoners can sometimes be victims. Now, that's a question that some people will say, well, why do we care? You know?
Hey, everybody ain't in
Yeah.
prison for life, so
Right.
and even if they was, they still human beings. So this ought to be interesting.
Yeah. And, that's not always the case. Somebody do a crime, or if they did a crime against you and something happened to them in prison, you really don't care. You really don't care what happened to them. You don't care, how their life turn out, or if they get hurt or if they get victimized. That's not something we really tend to concern ourselves with. But today I wanted to kind of talk about the other side, coming from somebody that's been to prison,
Okay.
and that perspective that he have, and what's going on in the prison, what need to be changed, and what opportunities they present to you, and are they even helping you out at all in the prison to be rehabilitated, and are they giving you a chance to not go back, and giving you a
Absolutely.
chance to make some corrections in your life and come out good on the other side. In his case in particular, we was talking earlier.
Okay.
First offense, went to prison at 18 years old, 20 years
Wow.
for a robbery charge, which is ridiculous. So I wanted to talk about, what that did to him and his thought process through everything. So,
Okay. So before you jump in there, Mike, 18 years old,
Right.
which obviously that's considered an adult, but I'll tell you, I got a 17-year-old at home. Totally different times. He's grown up in a different atmosphere, but even thinking back on myself at 18 years old, we don't want to say you're a baby because we don't
Right.
want to, question your manhood, especially the way we grow up. But just the reality of it, your brain not done truly developing. There's things that you can't comprehend and understand to a degree at that age. So most definitely, Mike, walk us through that situation and tell us how that experience was for you.
Well, first, when you talk about prisoners, the law states in the sentencing guidelines, you got to look at the offense and the offender.
Okay.
When the judge comes up with the amount of time they're going to give you. And it's so that everybody can get the blind sentence, the fair sentence. The
Right.
justice is
Lady
blind
Justice is
sentence.
supposed to be blind.
When you look at the Athena Protection Agency and foundation, is built off foundation is helping the victims. I can personally say before I was ever convicted of a felony, I mean, I got a laundry list of victimizations. Being shot,
Absolutely.
numerous fights where I got to help my brother. I'm fighting guys 2-3 years older than me. I was 135 pounds when I got arrested.
Okay.
So if you talk about growing up in the streets of Detroit with drug addict parents and me and my brothers and sisters basically being our foundation,
Okay.
you know, the streets will beat you up.
Most
So
definitely.
it's like, if you're going to study the offense, they are what they are. If you look at the offender and you look at the victimization in the offender's past and will help develop the mentality that that person had at the time he committed his crime,
Right.
the things he's been through is important in looking at the offender.
You make a great point
And then
there.
you balance, if you was looking for some kind of fairness or balance in the criminal justice system and they sentencing practices, the offender will weigh more heavily on a decision on to how much time you're going to give a particular person. Now, we can fast forward through my whole childhood, but, you know, I've been through it all before prison. Foster homes, group homes,
okay.
boys' homes. No felonies, just bad parenting. And it's not necessarily bad parenting. You know, crack was a real epidemic. It hit. Our parents didn't know what it was. They tried it. They got addicted.
Absolutely. I went through that, so I'm feeling you
I'm-
on that.
I thank God every day both of my parents still here because they've been through the mud. So as an adult, when I look back, I understand what they went through.
Absolutely.
As an 18-year-old, like you say, your 17-year-old is not fully mentally developed. He's not a man yet. He might be considered an adult male,
Exactly.
but he don't think like a man. And, you know, so when you're talking about prisoners, sending somebody to prison for how much time, you want to look at the individual. And me personally, my situation was I committed a violent crime.
Okay.
And it was violent from the beginning to the end. I was the youngest person out of 3. It was 3 of us who did it. Both of my co-defendants, one's my brother. He's no longer with us, but they have both had prison records and things of that nature.
Okay, in the system.
Yeah. And they was actually one on parole, one on probation at the time of the offense. I had never been convicted. I had never even seen the inside of the county jail.
Okay.
I did more time than everybody.
Wow.
This is the system that we talking about. So it was obviously no attention paid to the offender, and it was all paid to the offense. So that's
Okay.
like trying to solve a problem but not recognizing the actual problem.
Oh, we
So
do
you-
that a lot in our society,
Yeah.
especially in our community. We all grew up in the city of Detroit.
And basically the prison industrial complex became about business. So looking at the offender and the situations that the people who committing these crimes, these young people, I'm not talking about a 35-year-old career criminal who just keep doing stuff.
Exactly.
I'm talking about the young people who is going to get out one day,
Right.
but they still throw the book at you.
So you say you was. Let me ask a question. So you say you were 18 at the time. Now, thinking back on it, were there any prisoners that you encountered, or even just knowing, like you said, you grew up in the city? Did you know anyone that was serving prison time that was younger than you?
Yeah. I mean, in Ionia, you got prisons in Ionia that's 23 and under, and it's like 70% of their population. At MTU, it's probably under 20, and
What was the youngest you could say
15.
doing prison time with grown men.
doing 40 or 50 years. Like, you know, Detroit is Detroit, but you got little cities like Ben Harbor where they stretch them boys out. Like, you commit a crime in Ben Harbor
Oh man, I can only
or
imagine.
Muskegon, and you black, 'cause they have, like, kind of large, Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, Muskegon, Ben Harbor, them the largest black populations in Michigan.
Exactly.
And when you go to the NDOC, these are the guys, like, this is 90% of the black people. It's 90% of the population, but that's only 4 or 5 cities out of this big state.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So if you look how big Michigan is, how many cities in Michigan, you're filling up the prisons with 5 cities.
Right. I did. It's funny you say that. In 2015, if I'm not mistaken, just in the state of Michigan, African Americans are less than 13% of the population. And when you look at it on a wide scale, and they even had a map showing, you know, the more populated areas with African Americans, and we're, you know, like you said, there's a few cities, you know, primarily Detroit and those other cities that you named, but as a whole, we don't come anywhere near being close to the, you know, equal amount of citizens in this city, or I'm sorry, the state.
Right.
But like Mike is saying here,
We got
way more than half
significant representation in the prison system.
in the prison system, and
But
that's throughout the country.
Right.
But we're talking about Michigan. That's where we at. That's where we from. So most definitely interesting.
Well, the thing that Michigan did was they quit paying any attention to the offender. They took good time unilaterally
Okay.
from everybody that's coming in the future. I think it was 99 or 98. They just completely took good time. So basically what Michigan told everybody is, we don't care who you are. If you do this in Michigan, you're going to do this much time. That means
no gray
it's
area,
they don't care who the offender is. They don't care why you did it. They don't care about your past.
Right.
They don't care if you've been victimized. The only thing they care about is the victim you created.
Right.
And if you do some stuff like I did, you're supposed to get locked up.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. But
I
like
mean-
you said, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. You kind of hitting on it. You most definitely, as I like to say, you're on the block. You just haven't got to the house yet. But you
Right.
talk about just going back to your parents and the struggles they had in the early to mid 80s with the crack epidemic, and how it was treated back then compared to how a addictive substance would be treated today.
Right.
I just seen on the news the other day, I shit you guys not, somebody talking about we got to make sure that we stop putting these opioid addicts in jail.
Right.
It's like, wow, you know, they're saying this is sickness. It's not that they're choosing to do these things
Right.
to get high and whatnot. It started out because of surgeries and all this, that, and
Yeah.
other. You know,
Yeah.
but back then when it was crack in the 80s,
Oh,
it was a
crime.
choice. And
Yeah.
it was a crime, and anybody who touched that crack pipe needed to go to jail for 20 years. So imagine if we was doing that now.
Right.
So again, that's me always getting on my soapbox at least once in the podcast.
From going through so much, did you feel like crime was your only way to survive? Like, is that the only outlet you felt like you had to get what you needed? Was there no opportunity for you?
Without using hindsight, the best explanation I could give would say I was like his 17-year-old son. I was a boy. I was an adult male, but I was still a boy making a man's decision.
Right.
So I would, when a immature teenager, not looking at their age, a young adult, lash out emotionally, and we'd tell our sons, like, man, you a man, you gotta, you trying to teach your son how to be a man and how to control his emotions and come up with a rational solution. But this is a father teaching a son. When you have a boy with nobody
Exactly.
to help frame that mentality, and he got to figure out himself, there's no telling what decision he's going to make. It's really not just to just look at his actions.
Oh, I agree 1,000%
Because
with you on that, Mike.
Europeans, they
Oh, you can say white people on our podcast.
white people. I don't like calling them white because I don't like calling myself black.
I feel you.
Because one is pure, one is not. So that's just like.
It's a great point.
But it's like I had to change my mentality of how I see myself.
Okay. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, like I was telling my cousin, when I was in prison, when I got to prison, it was very few trades. They had just took all the colleges and everything out of prison, all the education, and they took the good time. So they had you up in here with no incentive to do anything.
Let me interrupt you quick here because I understand what you're saying. Before our listeners break down that good time so the listeners understand what you're talking about when you say good time. Because a lot of people thinking of Thelma and Michael and JJ right now when you say that. So break that down. What good time means in the prison system.
Good time is if you get sentenced to 10 to 20 years.
Okay.
That means a minimum of 10 years. In Michigan, you have to do 10 years. If you go to Ohio, with good time, if you do your programming, you do your education, and you stay out of trouble, you could probably get out in 7.
Okay, so
so it's just like it's an incentive. If you got a 1-year-old and they sentence you to 15 years because of a crime you committed trying to provide for this 1-year-old because in your immature state of mind, you feeling like, okay, I got to do this right here to get this money. Like, you're not weighing out a lot of options. You're not really looking at the future 6, 12 months down the line if I go get a trade. This is not how kids think.
No.
It's not how a young teenager think. They more show me the money. So it's like if somebody come to you with an opportunity to get some money and they dress it up, like you can put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig, but if they dress it up, you can be convinced through your immaturity to go along. Or you might even be the one doing the convincing because you done convinced yourself that we
That's
can
a
do
great
this.
point.
It's really not a reflection on who you are. But when you just look at the crime, they just went and did something horrible, throw the book at them.
Right.
When you look at the mentality of the person, the offender, in a just society, they would say, okay, well, we're going to take you off the streets because what you did, people could have got hurt, died, whatever. And it's probably not going to be for a short period of time. But what the good time do is it give people an incentive. If they'd have gave me good time on my 15 years, I'd have had to do 10 of them. So I'd have got out of prison in probably 2008 or 2009.
Okay, and when
but
did you
instead,
end up
I
getting
had no good time. So I ended up getting out in 2016.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did like 18 and a half, almost 19 years on the first offense. The point is, I'm kind of sick too, man. So I'm kind of.
So that was my issue. So when you're a first offender, and
Okay,
you
right.
commit a robbery, and you probably should be doing about 5 years, not 18 years of your life, and on a first offense. And I just feel like the sentencing guidelines and the system is flawed for somebody that can do a first offense 18-year-old, spend 18 years in prison when white-collar crimes and they defraud America and millions of dollars and they do 90 days in jail.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the turn-off for me. But also, when you get into prison, what issues did you face as far as you being a victim yourself? Was it people picking on you? Did you deal with assault? What did you have to deal with? Was it issues with guards? Did you face those kind of issues while you was in prison?
All the time at first. Like when I first went in the county jail, my first year in the county jail was worse than my first 4 years in prison. As far as physically, as far as violence.
Okay.
Because I was a real little dude in the county. But like I refused to be victimized. So therefore, I met everything head on. So yes, it was a lot of fight. I tell people all the time I lost my first 8 fights in the county.
Okay.
But I was ready for number 9.
Absolutely.
Because you know what I mean. But my brother raised me like that. I wasn't raised to back down from nobody.
Exactly.
Because I got little brothers and sisters. I'm used to taking care of them. So it's like I was always
Let's
one
back
of the
up and
big
talk
brothers.
about that just briefly. How many siblings in your family?
My mother got 4 kids and my father got 4 kids.
Okay.
So I got 7 siblings.
Okay. Now, you said you also went through some foster care and things of that due to the situation with your parents. When was your first encounter with being in the foster care system, if you can recall?
What year T came to live with y'all? Like
Yeah.
94, 93?
No, that
No,
was
it
in
was
the 80s.
before that. It was like 89.
Yeah, about 88, 89, somewhere
Yeah.
around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, the thing with that situation is me and my brother never got out the system because we never got adopted.
Okay.
So the people that went to homes, they got given back to my mama. Really like me and my brother. My brother Billy, he just kept going in and out. And I basically just ran away from the boys' home
Okay. It was just
and
in
went
the
back to
streets.
my mama's house. No, I went back to my mama's house.
Oh, okay.
You know, I just couldn't go to school or nothing. Like I really haven't
So
been to
basically, you
school
was in the
since
streets in
middle
a
school.
sense, right?
Yeah. Like
No.
I haven't been to school since middle school.
Okay.
I got my GD in prison in 90 days because I wanted it.
Well, good.
So,
I
you know, it was like everything in prison that you get out of prison nowadays, when I went through, you got it on your own. Because I did take sociology class. I got some college credits and stuff, but I had to pay for it. I had to do it on my own. It wasn't offered. There was no trades offered. It was
right.
whatever
Just
I
sit
wanted.
there and
You know,
spend time.
I was a little bit more ambitious than just wasting all my time and just getting out.
So do you feel like at any point was there an attempt at rehabilitation for you? Do you feel like that there was a system in place where
Nah.
you did your punishment and then at a certain point, you know, we're going to start gearing you up to deal with society? Because you was outside of society so long, what tools or anything did they give you to try to prepare you to get out?
What Michigan do is when they give you I can't even remember what it's called no more, but they basically tell you what kind of counseling they want you to take in order to get the parole, and then you go to the parole board will gonna give you probably another 12 months and tell you to take another class. So basically towards the end of your sentence, they're gonna make you take a few classes, impulse control, all these things to say that we gave him these classes to help curb his violence. But really, I sat in here for 17 years violent, took my classes the last year so I can get my parole. That's how you do time in Michigan now.
So to make sure I understand this right, 20-year sentence, the goal is, hey, the first 15 to 17 years of your sentence, you're just going to sit in here and absorb.
Well, you have to get a GED.
Okay.
Or if you refuse school, they're going to tell you that you can't go out to the yard till after 3 o'clock.
Okay.
The problem is in level 4, we didn't get yard till 5, so it didn't affect us. Because we had so much time that I can't leave out this cell anyway. So what's the point of waking up at 8 o'clock in the morning unless I want to?
Exactly. And that's what time they were offering the training.
Yeah. So it's like, it was Michigan Department of Corrections rehabilitation program is non-existent. You know, you really got to game the system to get out. Don't nobody pay attention to impulse control. Don't nobody pay attention to cage or rage. Them 30, 60-day classes, you take them once a week for 2 months.
But you said again, this was at the end of your time.
Yeah, the proof's in the pudding. All the recommendations that, for one, is so many people locked up that they don't even allow you to take those classes until you're about to go home. So you sitting there all this time knowing you have to take them, but they're not going to. The MDOC not putting you in those classes until your last 24 to 36 months. Depending on how much time you came down with. If you come down with 5 years, you'll get your classes quicker. If you come down with a lot of time, you can just sit there because there's people who about to go home who in front of you. You know what I'm saying? Okay. And then you got budget cuts and all this stuff. So, you know, like I was telling my cousin when I got to prison, I had too much time to take a trade because I was actually out of prison. I had 2 trades offered there. But I had too much time. When I go back to Ionia, like 10 years later, I was too old.
Wow.
They say, well, now you too old because the people that's 23 and under is at the front of the list. But I've been incarcerated since I was 18. So, but because I've been here for a decade now, I'm
you're
too
almost
old.
30. And
You know,
too old. You too old to learn.
And then, not only am I too old, but I got too much time left because there's still people going home before me that need these classes. So basically, by the time it was close to me to going home, I was in camp. There's no trades in camp. There's none of that stuff in camps.
Okay.
So by the time I get to camp, I'm not about to increase my level to go get a trade because for one, my security level is too low to be in those high security prisons where the trades is at. So basically, and you do your last 5 or 6 years at camp. So you're going to sit in a higher security level for 10 plus years with no trade. And then you get to your lower security levels and start transitioning to go home, it's no trades, period, because it's just a camp. You know what I mean? So,
right. So when you talk about those last few years going home, no type of preparing you for being back out in society.
Your recommendations. You get the classes that was ordered for you to take. Like sex offenders got to take their sex offender class.
Okay.
They'll sit there the whole 10 years. They last 2 years, they'll do their sex offender class so they can go home on their 10th year. A violent crime, they going to want you to take impulse control or cage or rage or thinking for a change. I got all three. More than likely, you're going to do those 3 things right before you come home.
Okay, so I'm thinking, I'm just picturing this timeline.
But you done sat there for 16 years. If
Exactly.
you wasn't motivated, you done sat there for 16 years becoming a manipulator, a hardened criminal,
Exactly.
probably worse than you
point.
was before. So if you got half a brain, you gonna sit through these classes to get out. So if you take it
it's
serious
a formality
or not,
at that point.
it's basically good word. The classes right now is a formality. On the books, it say, oh, we gave him this counseling. But in reality, just look at it for what it is. So he was here for 16, 17 years, and he got 90 days of counseling.
Right, after sitting down for
so you saying those 90 days in that class, you feel confident preparing him for society. Then why we couldn't just do this 10 years ago if this class was so powerful?
Right. And again, for our listeners, just
it's a formality.
Just to step away from the topic today. Our goal is not, again, we're not talking about that, you do a crime and you shouldn't do your time. That hasn't been brought up not once today. That's not our goal. We're just talking about
the individual.
How do we get that individual who, even within our messed up system, we felt that there was a point where you was going to come out. But the chance of you coming out and being successful is so low with the way it's set up. Because, again, I just keep thinking about, and I was getting ready to bring up the point, and you hit it right on the head. You got all this time before you get to these last, okay, now you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Let me straighten up. Let me walk straight.
Do my formalities.
You don't do that, of course, but what was you doing all those other times? You hit the nail right on the head. You said, I'm learning how to be a better criminal. Maybe not you personally, but when you're in that situation, what else are you going to do? You in here with people, we kind of talk about it in sports, a team that's losing, and you got a losing season going, i.e. the Pistons. You just don't care no more, man. Do the Pistons really look like they trying to make it to the championship this season? So, just to reflect back on how that had to play on the psyche. And you're in here with individuals like yourself who didn't get opportunity because of the age of the offense to fully develop. So now you're in here and you are developing, but guess what? You're developing amongst people who, because I'm sure there were prisoners that you encountered who were doing life sentences at multiple points. When was the first time, if you can think back on it, did you encounter being locked up with people who had life sentences?
In the county jail.
So at 18, 18, you locked up with people who are doing
Well, when you got a robbery, robbery, homicide, all those things, you go to the high security levels of every jail. So when you go to the county jail, they put you on the floor with the guys who got the double, triple murderers. And, they're not going to put a robber, somebody who went to jail for armed robbery, it don't matter how old you are, with the drug dealers. They try to not mix the violent with the non-violent. If you facing 2 to 5 and I'm facing life, they don't want us in the same cell. They try not to do that because they don't want the lifer to victimize, you know.
Right.
So that's why I feel like the topic is important because
Most
people
definitely.
go through so much stuff that lead up to the crime,
Right.
you know, and that should weigh on the sentence. That should weigh in on every aspect of the rehabilitation phase. Because if you study the person, you know what kind of treatment he needs.
And nobody's looking at that, and that's the
Nah.
frustration. You know?
And that's because prison in Michigan is a business. So, and the business is to keep jobs in Ionia and St. Louis and Adrian and Marquette and Ojibwe and Alger and Baraga and Travis and the Thumb.
Right, so
All
you-
these dead cities with nothing in them but 6, 7 prisons in each one.
All right. So when you talk about the business aspect of it, because our listeners may not understand what you're saying in that aspect, but talk about how you were being utilized for profit. Break that down if you can.
The best thing, the best way I could put it is this: prison. The MDOC got one of the biggest budgets, if not the biggest budget, on the government's books and mission.
Okay.
But inmates do everything.
Right. Talk
pennies.
about some of the things
We
that
clean
they
it.
had you doing. That was
You know, cleaning up, keeping the prison clean. That saved them money. When
Right.
we cook our own food, the inmates cook, the inmates run the kitchen, the inmates run the school building, library. They do everything. So all this money that's being pumped into prisons, you ain't giving it to the people that's running the prison. So you paying the people that's watching the people that's running the prison.
okay.
So the guards get the money, the inmates do the work.
Okay.
And that's why it's a business. Because
Right.
these 19, 20-year-olds now on you, like they grew up their whole life knowing they about to go try to work in these prisons.
No, I've seen also in prison where they have you responsible for doing things for the outside world as well. You know, I know we don't
Yeah.
necessarily have people making license plates.
No,
In a
but they
sense,
clean
but-
up parks. Like they got the gate pass.
Okay.
Like in Traverse City got a big festival called the Cherry Festival.
Okay.
And it's a couple prisons up there by Traverse City, Oaks and Pugsley. And I was in Pugsley. And Pugsley Gate Pass is like 200 people, and they basically is in charge with all the public works and cleaning up in Traverse City because they got they got ski resorts up there. They got a big tourist summertime and wintertime
Oh, absolutely.
income. And basically they use inmate labor to keep it clean,
Which is
grass
almost
cut,
free
things
labor.
like that. It is
Oh,
it
yeah,
is
just
free.
like you
Yeah.
said, you're
The
getting paid
inmate
pennies.
ain't getting nothing. It ain't free
So you
on
got
the
a
books.
question. You got a question from Candace, and she said, "Would you recommend those that go to prison get counseling, especially if they have trauma prior to prison?"
Well, Candace, it's a situation where if you're not studying the individual, you really don't know what kind of counseling to give them. So if they never ask you before when they preparing your sentencing guidelines after you pled guilty or been found guilty, if they don't never ask you some of the things you've been through in your life and what led up to, like in my case, it was no criminal record, it was no felony convictions. So you can't label me a career criminal. So without actually looking into who I am and what kind of person I was before the crime, then you don't know what to offer me. And that's
Right.
the thing. But
no one even
It's
asks.
no broad brush to paint to fix everybody. So you have to look at each individual offender before sentencing so that you know what to do for them while they're there to rehabilitate that person. Me personally, I hadn't been to school since middle school.
Right, you
so
talked about
it's
that
like
earlier.
the first thing they should have, in my case, before we sentence this young man, let's see how could education change his outlook on life? How could a trade in the education of GED? What you think that'll do for Mr. Tompkins? That question was never asked. It was never considered during sentencing, and it was not included in my. Everybody have to take GED classes. You don't have to get it, but you have to go to school.
Okay.
If you want to get a parole. So that's the broad brush they painted everything with, like the GED gonna fix everybody. You know.
Exactly.
A lot of people just want to get out they cell, so they gonna go to school anyway. And I love to read, so it was kind of easy. You know, I couldn't do a lick of algebra, still can't. I learned geometry because I like to read. That's how I got my GED.
Okay.
You know, I was never dumb, so I could multiplication, fractions, division. I could do that. It was just like higher. Once you get past 7th, 8th grade math, I had no concept. So I learned that by reading.
Okay.
So it's like, what I'm saying is, if you don't look into the individual before sentencing, you don't know what this person is going to need to rehabilitate this particular individual while he's in prison. So since those questions are never asked, it's obvious that rehabilitation is not even really a focal point of the sentence.
Agreed. So let's talk a little bit about the sentencing process and going through actually trying to defend yourself. Did you go out and get you a high profile lawyer to defend you?
Yeah, I had the best lawyer that no money can buy. She was so good. She didn't even know what I was charged with. She was my lawyer for 1.5 years and found out what I was charged with the day of trial.
So we obviously
on the record,
Michael.
So Mike, I had like the best lawyer. I mean,
Mike is
when it comes to free lawyers, she was worth it.
Mike is being sarcastic here, and I'm sure he kind of knew where I was going with that question. So, you know, and it's funny because Dan and I had a conversation. We actually talked about it on the podcast, you know, growing up.
And these court-appointed lawyers got 70 cases on their docket.
Easily.
Right.
The best lawyer in New York can't do 10 murders at one time.
Exactly.
Because like Johnny Cochran's not going to overload himself because he can't pay no attention. His team can't focus on the defense, can't focus on nothing. There's no investigations. Like real lawyers do independent investigations outside of everything the police did. They want independent labs to do fingerprints, this and that. They want everything. They challenge the chain of custody of all evidence. Court-appointed lawyers don't do nothing. No.
And the only reason I bring it up,
again,
I bring it up not to talk about defending necessarily the crime,
right?
Which, you know, if you can have a lawyer for that, I'm talking about someone being able to defend and individualize the person,
right?
You know, let's talk about Mike specifically and what Mike has been through in life. Because I couldn't stand AI, Allen Iverson, when he first was in Philly. Couldn't understand the edge he had on the chip on his shoulder. And, you know, why wasn't he just happy to be in the NBA? You're making a lot of money.
Right.
But then when you go back and you look at what he went through before he got to the NBA, yeah, very talented man. But before he got to the NBA, the things that he went through in life and the, you know, literally trying to put this young man in jail for life for something to find out he wasn't even there. So not only, you know, you got people that's doing these major sentences for stuff they did, but you got an individual who didn't even do nothing that was getting ready to be in the system. So my question was bringing up about the lawyers. We don't even get opportunity to find out who this person is. You just a number on the docket. You know, you got these public offenders with 70+ cases. You know, you was doomed from the start.
Yeah.
And again, I keep saying that we're not trying to get anybody to think that we're saying anything was okay, but as an individual, we, you know, as a society, we thought we would have learned something from the 80s, but this shit's still going on right now today.
It is. And I mean, we asking the questions. Prisoners become victimized either prior to whatever they did, but then you get into a system where you're victimized some more. So why should we care? Why do we care what happens to you when you go to prison? Is that eventually going to be a fallout that's going to come back on society when you get out? You know, is that something that we going to have to deal with again if we don't address this ahead of time? And I think that's the point that he's trying to get across is that you didn't even attempt to help me when it was clear that I needed some help. I did something wrong. I know I got to do my time, but you're not even attempting to give me any opportunity to win when I get out or throughout the time that I'm here. I'm just absorbing the negativity that exists in prison, the violence that exists in prison, the victimization that exists in prison. I'm just absorbing all of this shit. And now I got to come out with it, because when it's time for me to come out, I'm just taking these classes as a formality and not necessarily learning anything or getting any guidance or any push towards doing the right thing. And at least that's what I'm hearing you say.
Right. And let me fast forward, because we just got a few moments left in the podcast this afternoon. Let's talk about how prepared you felt once you did get out. So let's go back to 2016. Talk about that a little bit for me.
Well, like I said, I love to read. Like when I read books is like a movie. I can see what I'm reading, and I read fast too. So, like, I read a lot of books that changed the way I think. It's one book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it talk book about what you read it?
Absolutely.
Is that Namdi Akbar?
I'm not sure who the author is, but I love the breakdown.
It teach you, it show you the difference between
it's like Robert Kiyosaki I can't pronounce his last name, but his name Robert.
Yeah, and then As a Man Thinketh is the other author.
Okay.
But those are two of like my favorite books, because one teach you the mentality of what this dad teaching his son as opposed to what you teaching yours. In the community, we teach our son more. We teach our boys, don't back down, don't be no punk, quit crying. You know what I'm saying? All this other stuff
with physicality.
Because that's all. I mean, even if it's not that, we more focused on manhood and exhibiting your manhood, but not really teaching our children how to be men. Because being a man, you're going to be vulnerable. You got to understand that sometimes you're going to be in situations you can't control. You're not going to do everything right. Even like they always used to say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, what was the question again?
No, just talking about
how prepared you was
and
when you got out.
And getting out
Oh,
there.
yeah. So, like, the things that I absorbed when I was in prison, I came out with a different mentality. You know, I went through a lot in prison, but like I tell people all the time, life ain't beat me down. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know I wasn't going back.
Okay.
You know, I knew, like, the stuff I was doing, I ain't doing that stuff no more. It wasn't an option to me. So I changed that about myself, but I changed the way I think, because I changed the way I look at myself. I changed the way my views of success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have to have A, B, and C to be successful.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I get more out of trying to help somebody else than I do. I don't seek out help, but I would seek out to help somebody. That's more like an individual. So the things I took in prepared me for getting out of prison. I still ain't had no education, no skills, no nothing. I just had a mind. I just prepared myself mentally on my principles. It was just things that I wasn't going to do no more.
What exactly did you go through that made that change in you in prison? What were those things that forced you to say, I'm not ever doing this again?
Well, I didn't know how to back down from a fight. So, like, I would take on all comers. It's kind of like I had a Napoleon complex, but it was really more I was just skinny. But I was like, I ain't no punk.
Okay, right.
You know, so it was like, I knew in order for me to get out of prison, I can't keep taking these challenges. I can't keep on reacting the same way. It's easy after a certain point to fight. We can get up in here right now and fight, and then we can have a drink. I ain't got to shoot you, kill you, nothing. Like, and to me, being in prison so long and being in that environment is kind of normal. If we really have a problem, I feel like you disrespect me, it's kind of normal. We can fight it out. But I had to change that. That's counterproductive in society. People going to disrespect you because they can.
Right.
And, yeah, I can whoop you. But
Right.
I ain't trying to go to jail. You know what I'm saying? I ain't
Exactly.
trying to hurt you. And then you got family. I look at your whole situation. I look at mine. So I had to change the way I was thinking.
Right.
I had to change everything I changed about myself when I took the sociology classes and stuff. I did all this myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got my GED on 9/11.
Oh, wow.
The day the planes hit the towers, I was on my way to go take the first part of my GED test. Got back, I was like, "Oh, that was real."
Right. They
Yeah.
couldn't
And
even
we
believe
went
it.
back and finished the test. All that whole day, finished the GED test. And when every time we had a break, we went watch the news, do some more tests, watch the news, do some more tests. Prior
Wow.
to that, my first year in prison, I had refused school. But my bunkie, Michael Crenshaw Hill, he come in with his GED. Yeah, you weak. I got my GED. And he doing natural life. I'm like,
Wow.
let me get up out this bed. That's why I said I got my GED
Right.
in 90 days.
Right.
Wow.
I went to the case manager, told her to put me in school. Because at first I was refusing. I had almost 20 years to do. What's the point of going to school for the $5 a month they going to give me deodorant $6? What I'm going to do with that?
That's
Let me ask you one more thing. You said that even now that you out, you go through things and then you revert to prison mentality. Like, what is that thing that you revert to, that you relate everything to prison? What is that?
It's the emotions. It's the feeling. Like sometimes when you hear music and it take you back to a certain place and time in your life and you kind
True.
of feel it,
Yeah.
I feel you with that one. Yes.
everything take me back to prison.
Right.
Part of the reason is because I know I don't want to go back. So most situations, I look at it like, nah. You know what I mean?
Right.
But then some situations have nothing to do with prison. We can be eating cake. And man, this tastes like that cake in prison. Everything keep going back to prison.
Right.
That's why I was
Right.
telling them, like I'm sales shot. Everything
Yeah.
go back to prison. Good and bad, it ain't necessarily
Right.
negative.
Exactly.
Like all my time in prison wasn't negative, down in the dumps. I was never depressed or nothing. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like that with me. You know,
Right.
it was more or less after so long I knew I was wasting my time.
Right.
Right.
I got my GED in 90 days in 2001. I literally did nothing but what I wanted to all the way up until it was close to time for me to go home and I had to start taking my classes.
Right. Man, this is a
Okay.
great topic today. We
Interesting
can talk
insight.
about this most definitely the whole nother hour. We may
Right.
have to have you come back. But I want to thank you, my brother, for telling your story or giving us an insight into it. You know, as we get ready to close out today, can't thank you enough for your time and being as candid as you've been. I wish you the best in everything you do. Sound like you got a good head on your shoulder. You always had a good head on your shoulder. You just was in a situation where your environment had effect on decisions that were made, like you said.
Right.
You know, we as a society, you know, I say all the time, was you raised on survival, was you raised on love? You know, those two, if you look at those two things, you can immediately determine how people will react and deal with certain things. You know, but unfortunately, we ran out of time today. So as we close here, Dan, give our listeners one more opportunity to reach out to us and tell them how they can do that.
Again, if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us at Athena Protection Service on any social media platform. You can give us a call at 800-951-4866. That's 1-800-951-4866. Or you can reach us on our website at athenaprotections.com.
Awesome. And as always, make sure you're hitting that like button and that share button when you go on those sites. But again, Mike, thank you so much for your time today.
Anytime.
You know, it's most definitely good to hear how you came out of there and to have such a great person or outlook, I should say, on life. And for any young person out there listening to this, you know, if we could change one person from getting the opportunity to experience that system, we want to help you stop that. And as we say, you know, trying to think and react differently. It's okay to have a disagreement with somebody, and y'all don't have to hate each other because y'all don't agree.
Right.
You know, some people like Jordan, somebody like Kobe. Rest in peace, Kobe. But that don't mean that because I like Jordan, Kobe ain't good.
Right.
So, I know teachers out here don't like the language or the English that I use, but my point is we can disagree and still be friends. Yeah. Okay, so, hey, thanks again, Podcast Detroit, for having us. And thank you again, Mike, for coming out. Great topic.
Right. Thanks for everybody that listened to us. And again, like the video, share the video, and we'll see you next week.
All right, we out of here.
All right.